I'm Helen Lochhead, Dean of the Faculty of Built Environment at UNSW Sydney, and I'd like to welcome everyone online tonight for our 5th Engaging Women in the Built Environment event. I'd like to welcome friends and colleagues from industry, government and professional bodies, as well as my UNSW peers, alumni and students. And I'd also like to welcome those who've joined us for the first time tonight, as well as those who've supported this initiative since we began in 2016. But before we hear from our fantastic panel, I'd like to provide some background on tonight's event and demonstrate how far we've come in the last 5 years since it began. This started in 2016 as a response to the lack of equity in the built environment professions, paralleled in the faculty which I had recently joined as the first female dean. In fact, the first female dean at UNSW altogether. Aligned with the UNSW's gender equity strategy, I pledged to achieve 50% of women in leadership roles by 2025. More of that later. So this initiative was established to redress the balance and, importantly, to promote the diverse and extraordinary achievements and career paths of women in the built environment professions. While women graduate in almost equal numbers across all professions, whether industrial design or planning, architecture, construction and project management, there is still not equal representation of women in leadership roles. We need to change this. There is often an attrition from the built environment professions as women's careers may be interrupted or stalled due to unequal opportunity. And this has been highlighted again during the pandemic. Women have been disproportionately impacted with reduced working hours or job loss, and of course, increased caring responsibilities. And we need to ensure this is only temporary. So we need to support women to ensure they can realize the potential, whatever path they take. Women often pursue non-traditional career paths and yet achieve in equal measure in the full array of built environment professions, often excelling in unexpected endeavors. We need to recognize and celebrate this more often. So each year we ask professionals from industry, government and academia across all the built environment disciplines to share their experiences with us. And this year we've taken the opportunity to do things differently. We wanted to reflect on what has been achieved and ask some previous speakers for an update on what has happened since they last presented, their career changes, if any, what they've achieved, and where they see themselves heading in the future. Since 2016, UNSW Built Environment has achieved a great deal. We've gone from 1 female professor when I arrived to 7, which represents an increase from 15 to 40% representation of women in these esteemed ranks, far exceeding the national average, and my faculty leadership is more than 50% women. We've attracted over $400,000 in scholarships to support women in areas of construction, industrial design, travel scholarships, equity, PhD research, and women in leadership programs, thanks to the generosity of faculty supporters, including the Turnbull Foundation, Robin Mellon, the National Association of Women in Construction, Breville, and Roberts Pizzarotti. And I'm pleased to announce a new pledge from Breville for 5 scholarships over 5 years for women in industrial design and engineering. So thank you, Breville. But the biggest news is a generous endowment from Anita Lawrence. I'm very pleased to announce that UNSW Built Environment has been the beneficiary of over $2 million. Anita Lawrence was a UNSW academic and a trailblazer. She was the first woman to receive the University Medal, as well as the first woman to graduate from architecture. And she went on to become the first associate professor in architectural acoustics. In fact, probably the first and only professor in architectural acoustics. Anita spent her 30-year career at UNSW and created an endowment in her will to further the development of this area of study. We will establish Aspire in our high-performance built environments cluster on the impacts of noise in cities with 2 PhDs per year in perpetuity. This is an extraordinary gift and an opportunity from a woman who was ahead of her time and an inspirational role model. So thank you to all of our benefactors, and it is with your generous support that we can create more opportunities for future students. Now, our challenge is to get equal numbers of women in leadership roles in built environment professions to have and affect change. This requires working together and in more innovative ways. An event such as this is a great opportunity to acknowledge the achievements of women and their agile and professional career paths, particularly fitting and essential to the rapidly changing world in which we live, where we may have multiple roles in our lifetimes and work in roles and ways not yet even imagined. In fact, I'm doing that right now as we speak. So this is just one of our many initiatives that foster women's career advancement in industry, government, and in our university. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over to our very first speaker, Alison Myriams. Alison has made huge changes since 2016. She is CEO of a newish construction company, Roberts Pizzarotti. Working in the construction industry for over 25 years, she's deeply passionate about addressing systemic workplace issues in the industry and attracting and retaining more women. So let's hear from Alison.
Thank you, Helen. Last time I presented at this event, I was the GM of Lendlease's building business in New South Wales and the ACT, and a lot has changed since then. 3.5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to start a construction company from scratch. I was given a bunch of cash and a mandate from the board to build the best construction company we could. It's been an exhilarating ride, a lot of hard work, but definitely the most rewarding role of my career. It was an opportunity to fix the deep-seated issues in the construction sector, and especially the ones that act as a barrier to women's progression in our industry. 3.5 years in, we have 137 staff. We're working across 8 projects worth close to $1 billion. Last year's turnover was $226 million, and this year we'll turn over close to $400 million. My executive team is 60% female, and if you slice us vertically, the company is 32% female. We have full-time and part-time workers, and we have people working flexibly from remote locations. We have 4 scholarships at UNSW for women studying construction management and property. One of our most exciting achievements was winning the Concord Hospital project on a 5-day working week program, where every worker enjoys a weekend. We proposed this to try and combat the high divorce rates, presenteeism, and the high suicide rates that exist in our industry, as well as to address the challenges of Saturday work and caring responsibilities. Dr. Natalie Galea from UNSW is studying the health and wellbeing outcomes of the 5-day program. COVID-19 has certainly given us a bunch of challenges, but as they say, every cloud has a silver lining. COVID has thrown the construction industry into the fastest and the biggest experiment on flexible and remote working. And it has been an absolutely resounding success. So all those dinosaurs in the industry that said you can't work flexibly and work on site have been proven wrong. And that will be a game changer for our industry moving forward. I feel like we are on the precipice of massive change in our industry, and it's a really exciting time.
Wow, thank you, Alison. What an impressive few years you've had. Phenomenal, and really creating an impact in an incredibly important way.
Thank you.
So many important ways. Linda is a professor of landscape architecture at UNSW, and she is the first woman to become a professor in the discipline at UNSW. She's a previous president of the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects, and in her work she focuses on planning and designing public green spaces that support human health and urban ecologies. So over to you, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. When I presented 4 years ago, I had just been elected to the national president's role in the Institute of Landscape Architects, and it was an exciting time. We had really just changed the institute, and we were really looking at a new structure. And this coming in as not the first woman president of the Institute of Landscape Architects, but there hadn't been one for quite a while. It was an opportunity to initiate and implement a national gender equity study that started out by taking a census of what was going on in Australia, across the country in landscape architecture. And my comments tonight about women in built environment will be largely in relation to my understanding of that profession. And it is a profession that has attracted women over the years and is a profession that has quite a good balance of men and women in the discipline. The other thing that we were able to accomplish during the time that I was on the national board and national president was the taking ALA toward a reconciliation action plan, and so in that period of time we were able to get the first phase of our reconciliation action plan in place. Also in the last 4 years, another great highlight, of course, has been getting promotion to professor, and as Helen noted, first woman professor of landscape architecture at UNSW, even though it is one of the oldest landscape programs in the country. So that was a great, I think not only great for me, but I think great for the program and great for the faculty. Another thing that's been going on in the last few years is that I have introduced our program to the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, which is a group that the University of New South Wales is involved with, but there has not been the advantage of, excuse me, academics sort of down the line working with aspects of the research hubs. And so our landscape program was involved with, and is still involved with, the Sustainable Cities and Landscapes Research Hub, which is based at the University of Oregon. And bringing us and bringing my colleagues in landscape architecture into that organization has been not only benefiting us individually, but also giving profile to the university and profile to the program and faculty. In 2019, my colleagues Catherine Evans and Sarah Paget-Kersgaard and I hosted the Sustainable Cities and Landscape Conference here, which was a great coup. My colleague Kate Bishop, who is now the Program Director for Landscape Architecture, and I co-edited a book that was published in 2017, and that's a big deal for an academic to get a book published. This one was on designing cities for children and young people, and continues to be an area of research in which we work together. I think the theme of my involvement here at the university, the theme of my achievements, has really been not just about what I've done, but what I've done in collaboration with other people, and that's been an important part of my journey as an academic and also my contribution to built environment as a landscape architecture professional.
Thanks, Linda. And I would say you're a great collaborator and a great leader. So thank you for all your contributions.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Min Kong. Min is an award-winning industrial designer, even at a very young age. And she's currently working with the Breville Group. Min has been a lead designer on various high-profile projects already and delivering quality and innovation in both product and experience design sectors. So let's hear from you, Min.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, so I made a career change this year. Since we last spoke, a lot has changed. I've been a project manager at my previous work, which was consulting. And consulting work is very different to where I am now. So at Breville Group, I'll be developing one product for many years, as opposed to in consulting, I'll be managing multiple projects at a time, and they be multidisciplinary projects. So it's a very different type of work I'm working on, but I'm really enjoying industrial design aspect of it. So since we last spoke, that's a very big change in my career, but also there has been really great outcomes in terms of winning awards in my previous job in consulting. So I have won, we have won projects through Good Design Awards, IF Design Awards, which are great results, with clients like Cochlear, Nanosonics, and there's another one coming up this year, which is great. I was invited to be a judge in Good Design Awards and Victoria's Premier Design Awards, which were very exciting gigs, very fun. I'm very excited to be where I am, actually. It hasn't always been easy, but I think if anything, I think it just tells you that, all the women can also get to where we are. Even though our industry, I have to say, is very, very male dominant, but I think we can all do it. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Min. Actually, the industrial designers in built environment have just done some amazing things, and you're just one of them. So Keep it up.
Great, thanks.
So our next speaker is Dr. Kathy Smith, who's a senior lecturer in our interior architecture program at UNSW. Kathy's interdisciplinary research focuses on issues of social equity, property tenure, placemaking and urban renewal. And she's the inaugural Turnbull Foundation Women in Built Environment Scholar. So, Kathy.
Thank you, Helen. So I actually thought I'd talk about pivoting in career, and that's certainly what I did when I took up the Turnbull Foundation Scholarship. For me, I'd reached a point as an academic and as an architect and an interior designer where I really wanted to understand more about the underpinning forces that drive the forms in the built environment, such as property tenure, issues of community. And so taking up further study was really important so I could retrain. And part of that experience was doing the AGSM Women in Leadership program. And that was fantastic, and that's what I've done in the last year as well, because it introduced me to amazing women from all different disciplines, and we spoke about their struggles and different ways of engaging our communities and the challenges of leadership. I also have taken up a position in interior architecture, which for me is amazing. I work with the most extraordinary group of women and men who are very supportive, and for me it's cycling back to my first discipline, which was interior design. In this journey, and particularly the first time I experienced and participated in engaging women, was when I accepted the Turnbull Foundation Scholarship. And I was also at that point diverging in my career, so I was following a non-linear path because at that point I was returning to study. And I learnt that I needed to trust my instincts and follow that path that I really wanted to pursue. And it paid off dearly, because not long after I also won the Richard Rogers Fellowship through Harvard GSD. And that was this incredible experience for someone living in regional Australia, a working mum, to travel to London for a period and meet amazing people through that experience. And as of today, I did something amazing, which is publish a piece in The Conversation, which is summarising that research and some of the key findings of what to do in vacant properties. So that was quite an exciting experience, and I did a radio interview just earlier as well. So certainly for me, this has been an amazing pivot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, it has been an amazing journey for you, hasn't it? And yeah, you're the classic non-linear career path, but still achieving and still kicking goals. Yeah. So now it's time to hear from our final speaker, Abby Galvin. Abby is the New South Wales Government Architect and the first woman in this role in 200 years. How about that? She has worked for 30 years in private architectural practice and only recently has joined the public sector, but she has worked on public and commercial projects during her career. She is passionate about the ability of architecture to positively affect human behaviour, and so let's hear from Abby on what's been happening.
Thanks, Helen. It makes it sound like I've actually had quite a big change since I was here last, and in some ways on paper it looks like a big change. But in others, I think if I look at the past 30 years of my working life in architecture, it is just constantly changing. And I think in architecture, when you're sort of going from major project to major project, they all offer such extraordinary opportunities. They give you so much to learn. Whether you're working on a hospital, a research building, a master plan, an office sort of refurbishment, and I sort of feel in some ways that the move from private practice, albeit it is really, really different, into position in government as government architect, it's almost like just another huge new project that you're having to kind of meet new people, get your head around a new brief and a new sort of framework of all sorts of things. So yes, a change, but I never feel like I've been kind of stagnant in what I've done. So I suppose in terms of what I've achieved, I kind of like to think about that more in terms of what I've been able to contribute, and there've been some fantastic projects that have, I hope, had a big impact on the cities and the places that they've been, from projects like the Northern Beaches Hospital to the University of South Australia research centre through to projects such as the university campus up at Port Macquarie, new office building for the Department of Health. And you know, when I sort of talk about them as being projects that I've been a part of and contributed to, there's just nothing in architecture that can be sort of seen as a sole endeavour. And last year I was also incredibly sort of privileged and fortunate to be awarded the Marion Marnie Griffin Prize for my contribution in architecture. And as sort of humbling as that was, it was also, I felt deeply uncomfortable about it in many ways, because I said in architecture, everything you do is incredibly kind of collaborative. There is just not one person that's holding a pen or making a decision, and you know, from the very beginning of a project through to the end, and so often they are incredibly long processes. You know, there's nothing that is short. They, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, everyone sort of sitting here who's been involved in the construction industry and the built environment industry knows what that is like. And I'm sure even, you know, when you're talking about sort of product design, you know, it's that sort of burgeoning idea, and then you've got heavens knows how many people that are required to make that work, from those who assess risk to OH&S to, you know, the finest of the sort of the design elements. I mean, all sorts of things. So I think that's something that we always have to remember when we look at our own sort of personal contributions and personal successes, that they are very much a part of a, you know, these enormous sort of group efforts.
Thanks, Abby. That's great. So now let's go to some questions. I'd really like to start off the question by asking Alison a question. So aside from starting a major new construction company, you've done a lot in a short time to achieve balance in the construction industry and championing the 5-day working week. So can you tell us more about this specific initiative? Because I know it's dear to your heart, but I do think it's going to be one of the most significant and impactful initiatives that you undertake in your career.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits we had of starting it with a blank sheet of paper was we had the ability to attack a whole lot of things all at the same time. And the Concord Hospital tender came up, and when you look at the suicide statistics in construction, a construction worker is 6 times more likely to die from suicide than a workplace accident. And a construction worker dies every 2nd day from suicide. And they're statistics that we can't necessarily change, but I can influence them. And we said to Health Infrastructure, you of all clients can't afford for someone to die from suicide building a hospital to make people better. And to their absolute credit, they took it on board. And we're a year into construction. It is being done on a 5-day week. So Saturdays and Sundays are not a working day. We can't work those days except for high-risk activities like putting the crane up and down. And what we found so far was, as I said, Natalie's studying the outcomes, which I'm really excited about. She's studying our team, she's studying 180 workers, and we're also studying 6 partners of those workers to see the impact on home life. And what we've found so far, the feedback we've got is the workers love it. They are doing overtime during the week, so instead of working 7 till 3, they're working 7 till 5, so their pay is not enormously affected. They're saying, I've got better relationships with my partners, I'm taking my kids to Saturday sport, I have time for sport myself. A lot of them said, I haven't played sport since I entered the construction industry. The feedback from the owners of subcontract companies are saying the site is more efficient, that they're getting more productivity out of the workers. The feedback from the next of kin is saying, I'm having better relationships with my partner. One of them actually said, you've kind of saved my marriage. They're seeing their kids more, they're not depressed, they're happier. But what they actually said, which I hadn't thought about, is that the 6-day week perpetuates a gender stereotype, that the husband is the breadwinner and the mother is the carer, and their children are seeing those stereotypes. We are the 3rd largest employer of all industries across the country, and women are turning down meaningful work because they know they have to do the lion's share of the child raising and caring. So not only are we bad at bringing women into construction and retaining them, our work practices are actually inhibiting women in society. And when I hear that, I think we just have to change. So far, it's going really well. another year, and then we'll have the report once we finish construction.
And well done working with Natalie, because she's great.
Superstar.
Yeah, superstar. Fantastic. So thank you, Alison. So Linda, what do you see the major shifts in landscape architecture are? I mean, I know, for example, again, talking about hospitals and hospitals working differently, health infrastructure, thinking about, walking the talk. I know you're working on the health education precinct here at Randwick, and that was very much about looking at the qualities of the open space between the buildings and how you can make them better and impart the well-being of green and outdoors. Tell us about that.
Well, thanks, Helen. This is actually something we're still working on to get involved with, actually with New South Wales Health Infrastructure. As you know, there's a cast of thousands involved. This is an enormous project, and also UNSW Estate Management. So we see an opportunity here to get in at the ground floor, literally, to look at a longitudinal research opportunity in the precinct. And it's not so much that we're looking to do design work there, because certainly there's some marvelous designers already on the job and work that has been done. But this is an opportunity for our students and for the researchers in our faculty to see not only how these sorts of precincts come together, but also the role that nature and landscape design and green infrastructure, from green walls and green roofs and gardens and food production landscapes right down to a pot plant by the bedside. There really are some terrific opportunities for research there. And I think that is one of the trends in landscape architecture as well, that there's more of an interest in proving what the performance is of the work we do. And so that's really where research comes into this wholeheartedly, to generate the metrics, to say, okay, well, how do you know that that is what happens or how people respond to these places? And so I think that shift is also very much related to how landscape architects are becoming more involved in climate change mitigation and adaptation, just not saying we're making things look pretty or introducing more green into the city, but really looking at how ecological systems function to make not only the environment healthier, but humans healthier. And so this is a big area for us, and something that we're looking forward to engaging more with all the time.
Yeah. No, in fact, I've just started mentoring an academic in medicine who's working in public health, because and I said, well, why me? But she's interested in the public health benefits of, a healthy built environment. So, there's lots of synergies between health and well-being and the environment in which we work and live and play. So I think it's a really great research project. So Min, you're younger here, and you've actually achieved incredible number of awards, and many of them global awards. Everyone out there is sort of wondering, well, how do I get to be that person? What's some of the advice that you might have in terms of young people starting out to actually create an impression and have an impact?
Yeah, well, like Abby mentioned, it wasn't just me working on the project. Obviously, there were great engineers who were able to pull out the design intent, which was fantastic. And I had amazing colleagues also. We were able to try reviewing work together, which was great. But I think in terms of our industry, which is very, very male dominant, and where I am is pretty much very, like a boys' club. So it can be tough, I think, for ladies, and very intimidating when you first start, because, for a long time and even today, I'm the only female in the team of 20-odd people. And it has always been kind of that way, and it's very intimidating in the beginning. But I think what we need to really go back to is why we've chosen to be in this industry, why we are where we are. For me, it's that idea of being able to really elevate someone's everyday life in the form of a beautifully crafted, intelligent product, and bringing in that, whether it's an improvement in functionality or technology or it's just pure beauty. You know, it's pleasure to watch or to look at. So I always kind of go back to, yeah, today's has been tough. You know, maybe my voice wasn't heard enough. But then I get so excited about, you know, being able to craft these products. So I think that's one. I think number two would be, I think we all agree that it takes time to build skills. So whether it's, you know, CAD software, or whether it's managing projects, managing your own time, all these skills, I think it takes time to build. So, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. I think we just have to be patient with ourselves. We're going to fail many times. We're going to design something that's really horribly not right, and you don't understand why. But I think you got to keep going back to what makes product really sing. So always kind of, I guess, sort of developing your own sense of design in you. And another thing, I think the last thing I want to mention is in a male-dominant industry, I think it's important to speak up when you feel it's not right. Speak up, but be level-headed. I've seen sometimes situations where, you know, it's because I'm the only female woman, you know, that's why I'm being, you know, it's an unfair situation. But no, really be level-headed. And it's a great skill, I think, for anyone to learn, to be really assess the situation and be fair about it. Oh, maybe, you know, that they're not discriminating me. You know, maybe there is something else, you know, wrong with the project or the team. You know, it's not because I'm a female. But, you know, there are instances where, you know, it's because I'm a female. So I think learn to speak up, I think, is the last one I want to live with.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Thanks.
So Kathy, just, you know, I mean, you're a consummate cross-disciplinary. You've pivoted from interiors to, in fact, you're now at sort of like grassroots city making in terms of where your head is at. So has that been a responsive path, or has it been a proactive decision making on your part, you know, to sort of move from where you started to where you are to now? And also, can you tell us how the Turnbull you know, scholarship has actually enabled you to achieve that sort of shift?
They're both great questions. In terms of intention of career pathways, I would never have imagined that I would be doing so much study at the beginning of my career, nor shifting so frequently in many ways. But this has happened over a long period of time. So I would say it's a responsive circumstance, and also part of that was becoming a caregiver, so not just for children but for my mother when she was ill, and I think that really made me want to contribute to the world in a substantial way at that point in my career, to make sure that when I was thinking about and teaching in the built environment, that I was trying to engage with community and shift the structures within which we work, and also built environment. And so looking at policy and tenure and the financing of the built environment became important to me. So the Turnbull Foundation Scholarship also gave me an opportunity for a year of study, or over a year of study, 3-4 years of study, but it gave me a point where I could step away from what I was doing and really think about the experiences of community. So that's it's been a gift to me to be able to step back and take that pause in my career. And I also think as a caregiver, it's important to realise you can do things in sequence and do things part-time. And so I'm really lucky, for example, to be in interiors on a part-time arrangement and a flexible arrangement as well. So I can merge between working from home and teaching online and teaching face-to-face. And I also work with people who understand caregiving and balancing that difficult line between giving to students and your own family as well. So all of those things for me were wrapped up in every decision I've made over the last 2 to 3 decades, I think. Yeah, so it's been a long and responsive career, but hopefully now more strategically geared towards engaging community and governance as well. But certainly I do embrace opportunities that I see in an unconventional way. I was going to say maybe thinking of your career like a design problem. I found that useful as well. A design problem that doesn't necessarily have a straightforward solution.
Many options actually before you get to that final solution. That's right.
Yeah.
So Abby, I mean, you've had this, quite a stellar career in private practice, and now you've shifted into public world. What do you see are the sort of the key differences, or the key sort of advantages or disadvantages, or pros and cons of the public versus private path that you have seen already?
Literally sitting here thinking about it, I've gone from being in some ways an invisible architect doing very visible work to now being a very visible architect doing invisible work. It's this sort of strange transition. And I think as sort of professionals of the built environment, we all get this amazing opportunity to influence in a whole series of different ways. And ultimately what I can see has happened is that influence has sort of shifted quite significantly from being at the back end of a project, ultimately when a project is commissioned, which is where the realm that I was working, through to being able to influence that period of time before the project is commissioned, and then ongoing have an influence in its process. And I think that makes an enormous difference. We don't sort of see how many decisions are made within government and obviously within the private sector too, but where I've got the ability to influence is clearly within government, and that is looking at how various agencies across government actually make decisions, how they run their processes from a design perspective. And there's so many of them that have an impact on delivering built environment, from the Department of Education, Department of Health, Metro, Transport, Land and Housing Corporation. So we're working with many of them to look at their processes so that they can become better and more engaged clients, so that ultimately they get a better outcome as well, and as a community we get a better outcome. And that's how they employ people, how they engage built environment professionals, how they actually determine their brief. So it's helping people with process. It's being able to get in and provide an assurance and a review perspective where we engage panels full of experts to provide advice at various points. So it's giving government assurance that the projects that are coming to government either through the planning process or throughout their own agencies are being have got the right sort of checks and balances and are being reviewed in the right way. It's about being able to influence precincts as they're developing. There are many precincts within the Department of Planning, and actually more broadly. You think about all the work in the precincts around the metro stations, all of the sort of industrial rejuvenation sites from along the train lines through to the bays precincts, etc. And we get involved in multiple different ways, and sometimes high level involvement and sometimes a sort of a light touch. But even some of those light touches, if you get there at the right time, you can sort of influence the process. So yeah, in some ways I've become an influencer, which is kind of weird, given I'm not a social media person.
I know, but that's great, right? So so influence happens in all different sort of guises, and I think one thing I've heard from everyone around, in our panel tonight, and it's really been affirmed over the last 5 years, is that women actually are collaborators, and they, and I think about this sort of Ayn Rand version of Howard Rourke, the hero architect. It's so far from, one, the truth, but it's also very different from the way women work. Women really do reach out and connect the dots and actually look at the bigger picture beyond the project, beyond their brief, and think, how can I make a difference that is much more impactful than the particular confines of the brief. And so all of you have talked about improving quality of life, improving and influencing and having impact beyond what you've been asked to do. And so I think that is a great testament to the power of being boundary spanning and collaborators. So I think that I would like to thank you for that, but I know that there are questions from the floor, which we've been getting. So let's just look at some of these questions we got from Slido. So the first one is, can you please share the biggest obstacle that was presented to you and how did you overcome it? That's a good one. Does anyone want to take that question?
I can't think of anything that was so significant that I know there have been multiple points at which I've sort of questioned and challenged myself. One of them was when I was invited to be a partner of BBN, the practice that I was with for many, many years, and I thought, oh, no, that's not what I want. I don't want to be sort of involved in making business decisions. I'm, embedded in projects, and that's what I love doing, is being able to deliver projects, and that'll have an impact on my ability to do that. And I suppose in some ways it's sort of an obstacle of some kind. And my husband firmly sort of planted an article in front of me that talked about how women have been sort of almost brainwashed culturally into thinking that that's our role. And he said, this is not something, because maybe it's just not what I want. It's a sort of the nature nurture debate. It's a sort of a female thing. I'm not interested in being a leader. It's not me. And he said that's complete rubbish. It's something you've been sort of culturally preconditioned to think. You need to be able to sort of think in a different way and take those cultural preconditions away. You can still be a leader and still do these things. You've got the ability to do all of that. And so I think that sort of sense of personal coaching was made a big difference, because if I didn't have that, I potentially would have, made a pretty bad decision.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree with that. That you put that, all the obstacles I've had in my life, I probably have put them there myself. So rather than sort of saying, well, actually, that's not really an obstacle. It's only
Yeah, and I was just about to have a third child too, which I suppose on recollection might have had an impact on that as well. But just in thinking about that comment you made about women are collaborators and we work together, I think that's true, but I actually sort of don't think that's not true for men. I think many men are collaborators and join the dots. I just think, again, back to that cultural preconditioning, we're culturally preconditioned to say there's got to be a leader and got to be an owner and got to be a single face. And so we fall into those traps of saying, even though we might all be collaborators, one person's got to have the recognition for that. And we do the same thing when it comes to child rearing. We're culturally preconditioned to say child rearing is a female role, and we're culturally preconditioned to say that it's something that if a man is doing it, then they're potentially not sort of fulfilling their role to society as well. So I think there's all these sort of preconditions that we've got to shift. And I'm generally not somebody who gets out and talks a lot about being a woman in the construction industry. I sort of think just being here is kind of a way of helping that and changing those sort of cultural norms.
No, well, I agree with that, and I think the fact when Alison's talking about the shifts in the construction industry, the biggest winners actually probably will not be women, but will be men. Because they'll actually get their lives back and have full lives, as opposed to the bifurcated lives that our society is sort of destined for them. So I think everyone's a winner, really.
I think during COVID we've seen that, because flexibility was always seen as a women's issue, and that the mother needs it to do the caring responsibilities, and suddenly fathers have been at home and they've had dinner with their children and they've gone, you know what, I can leave work, I can come home, I can have dinner. If I need to log on, I can. But suddenly it's a people issue. It's no longer a women's issue, which I think is magical.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, the point too, Abby, that you made about the sort of hierarchical view of the world, and coming to terms more with an Indigenous cultural understanding of humans and nature and how we engage. It's a much more of a networked approach, and even that way of looking at the world is very different from the hierarchical, Maslow's hierarchy of needs view, that there's a top and there's a bottom, and so all of us benefit from a different way of looking and operating in the world in which we live. So.
And actually an example of that is the way we name. So you think of the way we name buildings or sites, cities, they're often after people. And then Indigenous naming is usually about a site's characteristics, not about a name after a person. So, you know, that's sort of a good example of something being about sort of land and country as opposed to being about me.
Yes, 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 yes. Human beings are above everything. So I've got another question here. Too often women in built environment battle with the concept of imposter syndrome and doubting their ability, which is often not mirrored by male counterparts, but I'm sure they have the same problem. But anyway, what practical skills can you suggest to overcome this? So, well, I think I'm going to throw this one to Alison because in real terms, you've got the hardest gig here, working in the most male-dominated industry. How have you ever had that, or have you always not felt that you could do anything? But if you did, how did you tackle it?
Definitely had it, and even taking the CEO role at Roberts Pizzarotti, I turned it down the first time because I didn't think that I had the pulling power to get men and women to leave their full-time secure jobs and come and work with me on a wing and a prayer that it would work. So I said no the first time. And the advice that I would give is surround yourself with people that believe in you. And what I did was I spoke to a couple of subcontractors, and I spoke to my husband, who said to me, "You've got rocks in your head if you don't do this." It is, from what I see, if women have 9 out of 10 capabilities, they'll say, "I'm not ready, I'm missing one." And if men have 4 out of 10, they go, "I'm competent." Don't doubt yourself. You know you can do it. If you are fully qualified for a job, if you have all the attributes, you're overqualified and you won't be able to grow in the role. The other thing I'd say is make sure that you've got a mentor, and when you get really good advice, pay it forward. During COVID, I had an experience with one of my mentees who was returning from maternity leave and treated very badly. And she came to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's not okay." And I gave her some strategies to go back to the company. And she went back and she got a different outcome, and she said to me, "I'm so glad I spoke to you. I wouldn't have done it without your support." And I said, "Right, now you have to pay it forward. And when you see that in the future, you help someone else with that advice." And to your point about women being collaborators, if we can all look after each other, if you're having that self-doubt, sit down and, tonight was a really good example of sitting down and saying, "Oh, what have I achieved in the last 3 years?" I had to write it down. You go, "Actually, I've been quite busy. That's good." Sometimes you need to sit and self-reflect and say, "What have I done? Wow, I have done a lot. I am impressive. I am getting something done." And believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. So as my golf coach would say to me when I say to him, "I'm doing this wrong," he says to me, "Well, don't." So don't doubt yourself.
Great advice, great advice. Another question we have is, how do you think women's participation in workplaces has changed over the years? Perhaps Linda?
Well, I think, as I said before, my point of reference is the workplace as it relates to landscape architecture. And we know that landscape architecture females in the profession have been working since they graduate. They're roughly 50-50 females and males as students, and also at the moment it's a little bit higher than that in the student cohort. About 60% of the students are female at the moment. And they have a low attrition rate. Landscape architecture is not quite as demanding in some ways as architecture, or the way the workplace is organized is a little more forgiving. But I think there's a point in women's lives when they do start going part-time. And so there's quite a long period of time in which women are professionals in landscape architecture, but then they start part-time, and generally it's related to becoming a parent for obvious reasons. But I do think that what we've seen in the last 4 months with the way things have shifted because they've had to, because of the pandemic, that there are now many more men who will be saying, as you've pointed out, Alison, I want to work differently. I can work differently. I like being at home. I like having this slow time with kids a bit. And I can also see how I can share more in a domestic arrangement if I'm here more of the time. So I think we're going to see not only women shifting in terms of their involvement in the workplace, but also men as a result of how we've been forced to work in the last 4 months.
Yeah, it's been the most disruptive period and accelerated that I've ever had in my whole professional career. So, and it's a game changer in so many ways, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's just reminded you to never say never, you know. I was saying to men, 6 months ago I would have said you can never teach a design studio online. And now I've said, well, you can. Whether or not it's the best way to teach it, I'm still learning, but it's possible.
But I also think there's been many silver linings of, you know, the dark cloud of COVID. I mean, you know, we all just sort of complain about the, you know, being in ISO, but on the other hand, you've actually reconnected with family and all that sort of part of your life in a very different way from ever before. So there are all these positives as well. So another question we have is, the dynamics have changed in the built environment workplaces, whether it's architectural construction or industrial design for that matter. So what advice would you give, Min, to women starting off in a male-dominated industry like industrial design?
I would say, I don't know whether it's socialization, like we talked about, whether, you know, men feel like they're the breadwinners and, you know, they got to be the leaders, and I don't know whether that comes into play, but I think men, they kind of fake a lot of technicalities, so they kind of say a lot of things that they seem to know a lot about, but actually some of them don't really know much about it, whereas, like, you know, you're saying, you know, women might know 90% of this stuff, but then they don't feel confident to say it because they don't know that 10%, but no. So, you know, just speak your mind, talk about what you know and what you're passionate about, and I think that's really the key, and really, you know, that so that you can really focus on your passion and, you know, why are you attracted to the design industry in the first instance?
Be engaged.
Yeah, be engaged with your own passion, and it's hard not to get intimidated, I get that, but then also, you know, talk about what you know, because you might know a lot more than what you think, really, yeah. You can catch a lot of men just saying a lot of empty stuff. I'm not saying all men are like that. I mean, they're very knowledgeable.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah,
yes.
This is a balanced conversation. Actually, talking about balance, we've got another question here, which is how to balance between family life and professional lives in construction, or you talked about it a little in your actually, but a privileged position as well, being an academic, because you do have more flexibility.
That's true.
But you know, maybe, you know, like Abby, you've had 3 kids and had a full-time professional career, and I know Alison does, and I've done that too. So how do you manage that? You've got a very caring partner.
So I think there were 2 key parts to that. One were my partners in business, and the other was my partner in life. And they were all men at the time, who had an incredible view of things, and we didn't have a divide. So my husband had, you know, being a part of looking after the children was considered as much his responsibility as it was mine. There was never ever a question about that. So I think you surround yourself with the right people. And then it was exactly the same in business. There was never a case of, well, what are we going to do now? You know, that you're pregnant. It was just, how can we facilitate whatever we need to facilitate to get you back as soon as possible, working in whatever way you need to work. And we never, you know, I didn't have to sit down and negotiate a position. It was kind of fluid and flexible, and it, you know, and I think surrounding yourself with people who think in that way is so important. And knowing that it's your, you know, it's your kind of right to have that position as well. So I was very, very lucky. But then again, I think you kind of make your own luck too in the people that you find that you spend time with.
Everyone's lucky enough to be in that position. Sometimes, like in our industry, which is really niche, and you don't have much choices to move about in terms of work. And I think you just have to say, look, this is what I need, what I want.
Yeah.
And I think learning to speak is a good skill. So yeah.
Which comes on to our last question, because I know we're running out of time. So what is the best advice you've received that you wish you knew when you started your career? And actually, I might just quickly run around the panel and get everyone to answer this question, because we've run out of time. And so, Kathy, maybe starting from you.
I wish someone had told me to, following on, find your people. You need to be with people who share your values and your ethics, because when you work with people, you need to feel appreciated, and that won't happen if you're not on the same page. So I think finding your people would be the thing that someone, I wish told me, but also it might take a very long time, but keep looking for them.
Yeah, because when you do, it's when you really
amazing.
start going in. Okay, Linda, what would you say?
I would say probably, I wish somebody had assured me that heading into a career wasn't necessarily a straight line from here to there, and to be comfortable with that, and to also learn to develop your resilience and flexibility in being able to deal with the things that are going to get thrown at you.
Yes, now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Yes, okay. What about Alison?
I would say life is short, stop and smell the roses, and work will always be there tomorrow. So don't stay back to do it, it will be there tomorrow.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Unfortunately, yeah. That's a universal truth, I think. Min?
I think I wish someone had told me going into for example, for industrial design, someone had warned me about, it's a very male-dominant industry, but I wish people hadn't done that I don't see that division. I wish I had just seen people as, that's just, people, that everyone's just people, and not to have that division, and really, taking on everyone as who they are. And I wish I didn't have that kind of divided vision from the beginning.
Great. Abby?
So I got some great advice from an ex-government minister once who was providing advice to us in a bid. And he said, be yourself, don't try and be who you think they want you to be, and present in a way that, I should be sort of trying to be more serious, or trying to be more funny, or try to be who you are. He said, find what it is that's really, authentic to you, and be yourself. So that was an amazing piece of advice, and I've continued to give that piece of advice on to people. And the advice that I wish I had been given was have a break every now and again, because I haven't had many breaks, and it's kind of okay if you do.
Yes, that great advice. Actually, I would say mine is say yes, because don't put up those obstacles. Just say yes, and no lives will be lost. It will just pan out, and it'll either be the right decision or the wrong decision, but whichever decision you make is the right decision, because you learn something from it and you grow stronger. So I think that's been a really great sum up. And I would just like to say what an amazing group of women we've had here tonight. So I'd really like you to all join me, wherever you are, to thank our panellists for being here with us tonight to share their stories. So I would like to start that just quickly and just give a round of applause for everyone here. You canned applause, unfortunately. We're in a very empty auditorium. So you can... But I just want one last thing. Since we started this initiative 5 years ago, it's created a groundswell. And so the question for me is, so where to from here for this initiative? How can we scale this up? Tonight we've had over 600 participants joining us online, and with your online engagement, there is potential to have even greater reach than ever before. So I'd really like you to sort of maybe join on our online forum and click the survey to let us know what you think and how you'd like to see this initiative grow. I know we've seen incredible sort of scholarships and partnerships and graduate opportunities and research that we never would have actually seeded if we hadn't have actually brought all these incredible women together. We've had incredible promotions and seen leadership and in universities and outside universities. So I think we can do more, we can always do more, and we can always do better. So let's hear it from you. But until next time, thank you for joining us and enjoy your evening. Good night. Now we can all wave. See you. Thank you. Bye.
what's changed for me is, well, now I'm Dr. Natalie Galea and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Australian Human Rights Institute at UNSW. I've also commenced a number of projects, key of those being Project 5, A Weekend for Every Worker, with Roberts Pizzarotti and Health Infrastructure, where we are studying the intervention of a 5-day working week on the well-being of construction workers, but also on their families. Well, firstly, I think things are shifting. The sector is starting to see that we need structural changes to address gender equality in the sector. It's no good just fixing women. We actually have to look at how we deliver and design our construction projects, because they have an impact on the humans that are building the jobs. Well, I spent much of my 15 years in the construction sector really feeling like I was walking on a tightrope. I didn't know how to fit in and to be treated as a construction professional. I dressed up nicely, I swore, I did whatever I had to do, and it's really exhausting when you do that. So my tip is just be yourself, and people will love you for it.
The last time I spoke at Engaging Women in the Built Environment was the very first event, which was 2016. And since then, I have been promoted to Associate Professor. I've published my first sole-authored book, and I've been invited to do quite a few interesting international events, including a visiting appointment at Kyushu University in Japan. So I was thinking about what my insights might be that I could share, and I think the most important thing that I've learned is that excitement is contagious. So if you're excited about what it is that you do, a little bit of that excitement will rub off on other people. Try and do something that really interests you, and don't be afraid to be a little bit of a nerd about it. It's okay to ask for help and advice, and it's also important to be there if other people need to ask you for help and advice. And sometimes people just need someone to listen, so even if you don't have all of the answers.
When I spoke at the event, I spoke pretty much about PALA, which is advocacy group for gender equity in architecture and the built environment. I'm still very actively involved in that, amplifying and extending what I've been doing with that group, rather than any substantial changes. That work was recognised this year. I won the Paula Whitman Prize for Gender Equity from the Institute of Architects, which was very gratifying. The sort of arrival of the pandemic in our lives, PALA's been very, very busy trying to provide support and resources and opportunities for discussion. So all of the data, we've run a big survey, all of the things that we always do, we have just ramped up further in response to the situation. So one observation I have in the last few years, and possibly since I did the event at UNSW, is there quite substantial increase in the women in leadership positions in the profession, which is very heartening. Many women have kind of stepped into leadership roles within professional bodies, both in terms of the elected people and also administrative people. I would just encourage everyone to sort of stand up and find, take on public roles if they can, because I think that visibility is really important for the kind of collective. Being thoughtful and brave about when you say yes and when you say no. Say yes whenever you can, but also to say no when it's the right thing to say no. So if you're saying to say yes, I think if you're about to say no because you're a bit scared and you think you might not have the right skills, then that's probably when you should say yes.
My name is Tiana Jane Shona McBeth, and I'm a Wiradjuri woman with close ties to Gomeroi country. I completed both a Bachelor's and Master's of Architecture specialising in the social agency stream here at UNSW. I currently work as a graduate at BVN Architects and have previously worked in the design construct firm C+C Architecture Workshop. In the future, I would like to be known for creating spaces that are full of purpose and reflect a broad knowledge of everything inside and outside of architecture. I want to learn from communities, local histories, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, our flora and fauna, and also understand how we think and respond through psychology of behaviours and social sciences. I would like to see the schools and libraries being built in our cities in places like Dubbo and Tamworth. I want children who live here to have the same opportunities as those in our cities. Now that we have all successfully worked from home during COVID, I cannot see why our profession has to almost exclusively work out of our country's cities. There are many things that I would like to contribute to the built environment throughout my career. I have key interest in continuing my Byra Hadley research into architecture and prison reform, affordable housing, social housing, homelessness.
So in terms of my career, I've moved to an in-house design team from a design consultancy, a very different type of work. Working in an in-house design team allows for a deep dive into one project for a couple of years, as opposed to managing multiple projects at a time in a consultancy. And since we last spoke, a couple of my projects from the consulting work have won Good Design Awards and Red Dot Design Awards, so they're great results. Well, so my industry, which is industrial design, or some people call it product design, is a very male-dominant industry. Where I am currently is pretty much boys' club, and surprise, surprise, most of them have never really worked with a woman industrial designer before, which can be challenging at times. But I find that the best way to work in a male-dominant industry really is not to divide people into men and women. So we can really focus on bringing the best out of people and therefore the best outcomes in projects. So as women, I think we really bring unique contribution to projects and team dynamics. I do see the dynamics really, in the dynamics things, it changes. We bring sensitivity to whether it be people's experience, how one experiences a product. I really would like to encourage the ladies to be really believing in that uniqueness that we have, and really understand that we can choose to be discouraged or not, and continue to walk in the direction of our passion that initially brought us here.